Hey, good afternoon, everybody. It's noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern, and it's a Monday, which means it's time for Content Chat. And today I'm excited that we have a longtime Content Chat community member, but first time video guest. We have Mariah Tang here. And Mariah, I am so excited to have you here today to talk about getting the balance right on social media between PR and content. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. Thanks, Erica.
And why don't you take a minute to tell everybody a little bit about who you are and what you do? And if you wouldn't mind, maybe you remind them about your former name, because I know a lot of folks know you by a slightly different name.
Yeah. Let's start there. I got married in May. My last name used to be Obajinsky. It's now Tang, which is a little bit easier to say and spell. So
Congratulations.
hopefully, thank you. It was a super fun day. If anybody wants to hear about our wedding on a pile of trash, let me know. It's a weird story. But I am AVP of Content Marketing at StayMates. I've been here for 5 years. We are a professional services agency out of Iowa, and we preliminarily work with higher ed and healthcare. But I've had a background in B2B, journalism, all kinds of different industries that we lean back on when we're talking with groups like this.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for joining today. I personally have had social media as part of my job off and on for most of the time that social media has been a thing, just because, I was an early adopter of social. I was even pre-live journal level social, Friendster, all that kind of good stuff. I've always been an online social person because as an introvert and a writer, how amazing is it that you could make friends on the internet without ever having to speak to them in person? It was great.
Right.
But it means I also have, like, I think, a very different perspective on social media as compared to some folks who have either only done PR or they've only done social or they've only done content. So I think a good place for us to start is maybe just talk about, why social is, such a great investment for folks and some of the goals it can accomplish. Because I think people can kind of get in their own silo, and I think this is a good way to kind of get them grounded and thinking about what social really can do for a company.
Yeah, I think, my wheelhouse is content marketing, blog primarily. And so we use social all the time for either paid or organic distribution of stories for CMAtes, for clients that we work with. But I think there is another pulse in social media that groups are getting more and more familiar with and more comfortable using, which is connecting with just different communities out there, whether that's journalists, mom groups, if you're talking about pregnancy content, professional groups on LinkedIn, if you're working on, items like for Content Marketing Institute or some of those professional agency type uh, topics. But I think people are starting to see social media as a gathering place, as a community building place, as opposed to just kind of praying out the thoughts and wishes and ideas that you have and hoping that somebody latches on. And groups like yours, Erica, and we're seeing more and more people getting savvy about the way that they're sharing those stories, the way that they're sharing their insights, having it be less about, hey, look at me and how great I am, and more about what will you, the audience member, take away from this? What are you looking for, and how can we help you?
I think that's so important to think about because, if you're only talking about yourself and using it as a broadcast channel, you're really missing out on the social aspect. And it sounds, always, kind of silly when you say that, but it is social media. There's an expectation that there should be engagement, yet frequently brands feel like, oh, maybe they don't have enough staff time in order to really do engagement, or there's disagreement about, oh, well, who should we amplify or not amplify? And oh gosh, if we reply to one person, then we have to reply to everybody. And there can be this whole slippery slope. And so I feel like, it's so hard because people have to realize that social isn't just a tiny little silo. It really does go across the business the same way that content goes across the business. And probably part of that happens because of the siloed way that social is kind of in the org chart in so many companies. And I don't know about, where you've worked, but I've worked in big companies where social reported into PR, and the social channels were owned by PR, And, good luck getting on that calendar if you were on the content side of things. So I'd love to hear your perspective on where you've seen social reporting in and how that kind of affects some of the dynamics about what then actually gets on the schedule.
Oh, yeah. I mean, some of the groups we work with have a 1 to 2 person teams. Some of them have 100 people on their teams. And across those differently sized organizations, we've seen 100 different setups. So within healthcare and higher ed, there's usually departments and programs and levels. And a lot of the time, all of them have their own social media channels. All of them have their own social teams and different strategies and different perspectives on what belongs on social. So in one institution, you might see a really super fun Facebook channel or Instagram channel that has great visuals, fun videos, little POV perspectives, and another channel from the very same institution that's just dry and boring. And, we won this award. Here's a picture of one of our providers, our faculty members, and that's it. And so it just kind of leaves people on alerts, like, where do I follow? Who do I, which channel should I be after? And a lot of the times they're going to go towards that more engaging group. So, and internally, it kind of causes a kerfuffle like, well, this group over here is smaller than us and they have a smaller budget. So, why are they getting more attention? And it's just kind of this tension. But yeah, to your point, a lot of the time we see groups reporting into social media groups reporting into marketing. We've seen them report into communications. Some of them we've even seen go all the way up to the top where they're reporting to a dean or a faculty member who, if they're lucky, gets what the social media vibe is all about, but a lot of the times that's not how it works.
Yeah. And I know, when I've been lucky enough to have content and PR reporting into me, then I've also had social and made sure that we've had those kinds of, had the good communication, have those integrated calendars. But it's been, in so many organizations, I have seen, just such a huge disconnect. And that's even as somebody who I come in sometimes to do content strategy and content creation and executive thought leadership. And frequently there's a social media person who feels, unsupported and pulled in a bunch of different ways and who has different stakeholders who have really different opinions about what the purpose is for the channel, because of course a lot of folks don't take the time to put together those kinds of guidance or governance documents, because governance is scary.
Yeah.
So, you just don't do it, right? You just do what people ask.
Yeah. Or somebody says, this faculty member wants this thing right now, and they have to shove it to the very top of their social calendar if they have one. And then
And you
everything
can't
else
say
gets
no
pushed
because you
back.
don't have, a documented strategy.
Yeah, exactly.
But that said, there are some very distinct opportunities for PR versus content marketing. So maybe we can start by talking about, currently what some of the really good opportunities are from a PR perspective to engage on social.
Yeah, so absolutely the ability to connect with journalists and media professionals. You can show that you are supportive of their work by making relevant comments, by liking the pieces that they share, by just picking some out of the news, media outlets that they have worked on and sharing it organically for yourself. Giving them really authentic support shows that you are in their corner, you like what they do, you're aware of them. So when it comes time to actually reach out and pitch your story, they have some familiarity with you. Now, they might not know you personally, but they've seen your name, they've seen you engaging with their content. Some other ways to kind of position PR a little bit differently. They There's probably several PR people listening to this, so I don't mean to be offensive, but there's this stigma that PR is about, grabbing that flashy news item and shoving it out to as many eyes as you can get. We all know that that's not how it works, but that's kind of the perception. And so it's an opportunity to really go back to your storytelling roots, pull those little tidbits out, connect with people in a way that helps them feel something when they read your pitch or your content out on social media, instead of kind of like we mentioned earlier, this is a reason why my company is amazing. This is a reason how you can feel good about your life, or your life can be made easier with help from my company, or whatever that niche is that you have. It's really turning those stories that you want to highlight into something that can benefit your audience. that's something that content marketing has been built upon, but I think that the two are really converging as time goes by with overlapping goals, overlapping platforms like social media channels, and overlapping stories, frankly.
So true. And, a big part of that overlap comes in with the thought leadership programs, because if they're going to work really well, thought leadership has to be that partnership between the content marketing team and the PR team, because the PR team understands what content, is really going to resonate with the editors that you're pitching, and, have those relationships with those editors, be understanding what they've been saying on social so that way they can find the right angle. But then it takes
Mhm.
the content pros who also really know how to craft that, compelling story that, even though it's coming from a brand, it has that authenticity, it has that experience, and that it feels valuable enough that you can actually get that link in the earned media. Because, it's rare that you can get a link back to content on your site, but when you have really great ungated content, you can do that. Again, it takes having that marriage together. So let's talk a little bit about then how you, as a content marketer, how you've really used social, to activate your content marketing.
Yeah, yeah. I think one of the best ways to do it is like kind of like what we were talking about before, whether you're writing about a new class or a new program or a new, faculty member joining or your new CEO coming into the institution, try to drill down and ask some questions that make that individual or that service that you're offering really relatable to your audience. So I'll give you an example. We work with a group called Max Planck Florida Institute for Neuroscience down in Florida. They're a neurological research facility. They don't see patients. That's all academic and all research. And so sometimes it's challenging to find a good angle to share for a widely consumable story. But a few years back, they had an individual who helped found the institution come back to Florida and resume a leadership position at MPFI. He'd been traveling in Germany and working there for 10 years. So we could have released a press release type story that just said, this individual is back. He's our new CEO. Life is great, move on. But instead, we turned it into a homecoming story. So he's back. He brought all of this institutional wisdom from his decade in Germany, and now he has resumed his post here. This is what he's bringing to the scientific community in South Florida and to the US at large. And that reception of the story was much better than it could have been if we just said, yay, new CEO, and just kind of did a spray and pray announcement.
100%. I mean, when you can take something like that and have it be this compelling, journey, and get people involved at a human level, that is so much more impactful than, being a hiring announcement. Hiring announcements, maybe somebody's best friends and stuff, or people want to sell things to them. They go, congrats, and sure, that feels nice. But from a business standpoint, getting people just saying congrats doesn't really help you get your story out or drive towards your business objectives or organizational objectives. So I love
Yeah.
that as an example.
And on social media, when you get personal, when you tell a story instead of just making a statement, you're really able to do more impactful sharing of media, things like that. So with your typical, new CEO type announcement, you picture a headshot, you picture, a couple paragraphs of text, and that's about it. But when you really open it up and make it about that individual and their life and what they're bringing, you have the opportunity to share some of those more warm, actionable, personal images or videos that go along with that. And we all know that social media algorithms love rich media. So you're going to get more organic eyes that way anyway, plus the draw of people who are already interested about that topic.
And when you get personal, you're inevitably going to be mentioning, you know, different organizations, different places, all of these things that can really increase the reach that you're not going to get if it's, again, just a boilerplate kind of press release.
Yeah. You
And I
can't underestimate the
hear my
benefits of
dog is
tagging.
making noise here, so you may get to meet him shortly.
Okay. It's always more fun with more people and guests, right?
Speaking of the algorithm, everybody loves dogs, I hope.
That's right. This was planned.
So, in addition to it being really helpful for content and for PR, I've also found that I end up using social listening as a really good part of building my personas and my archetypes for helping folks really understand who they're talking to when they're talking about their products and services. Because frequently folks have it in their head who those people are that they are, trying to sell to, but they, are using their own internal lens. They're using their own way that they talk about the product or that the brand talks about the product. And so they can really not even understand necessarily how other people really view their company or the primary problems. So I'm wondering, have you also used social for some of that kind of competitive research and getting to know who you're talking to?
Oh, absolutely. I heard a client the other day, we were talking about enrollment and reaching out to high school students and their families. And, the whole conversation was Instagram, Facebook, try to reach the parents that way. And somebody said, no, but no parents are on TikTok. They don't do that. And my jaw just hit the floor. Everybody, I turned 40 this year. So everybody I know is on TikTok, whether the younger generations like that or not. There's this whole mom talk, dad talk thing going on TikTok. So if you have that kind of stonewall in your brain, like this is a platform for young people and no one else uses it, then you're going to be missing out on a huge audience. And my daughter, who will be 17 this fall, pointed out that some of the people in her class use Facebook too. That's
Yep.
how a lot of the high schools communicate with their students, through Facebook groups and things like that still, and Instagram. So we can't discount the old lady type social platforms that we all grew up with as being obsolete to that younger generation. I mean, I know I message my daughter on 3 or 4 different platforms, and sometimes one of them sticks. So I think it's just a good reminder to not put all your eggs in one basket, and not to discount different platforms just because you have this perception that maybe people aren't there.
I think that happens a lot with Facebook for B2B folks because people will have the perception that Facebook is just where people are going to catch up with their family or people that they went to high school with. But the thing is, probably about 5 or 6 years ago, when there were some changes with the way that LinkedIn did a lot of their groups, I saw a lot of professional groups on a whole range of topics and across industries move over to Facebook because it was just a really easy place to manage those groups. And then once there was the integration between Facebook pages and Instagram accounts, that too really kind of, for me at least, it kind of solidified that there was a lot more of that kind of cross pollination happening in the B2B space too. And you wouldn't know that if you don't go and look. And that's actually something I think Spark Toro has been really kind of good for kind of helping me talk to clients and give them maybe a little bit of a challenger perspective because they'll have an idea of what channels they should be on and what channels just don't matter anymore, or they'll hold on to certain legacy channels that used to be really important. But it's so cool to be able to go in and say, well, it looks like people who are talking about your topic or who are part of your industry or who follow you on social, well, here are the accounts they're actually really using. And frequently things like Reddit are being used a lot, and most brands aren't even looking at Reddit. And it's so easy. You can join a subreddit and just lurk, or you can use a tool like Feedly to be looking for, specific mentions and stuff. So that way you can just, hear what people are talking about and where.
Oh yeah. And we've really tapped into using Looker Studio dashboards to pull out organic search queries. And so using tools like that, you can see what people are searching in real time out on Google, and then you can use that information, those queries, those requests, to really build out substantial social media content. You can use it for blog, you can use it for just about any type of content that you want to deliver, because if you're capturing what people are searching on Google, you are able to really kind of get inside their minds, that point in that user journey. You can connect all of those dots from the top of the squiggly funnel all the way down to the end, and make sure you're covering your bases, whether it's in one large long form content piece, or if it's in short little bursts like small videos on social media, walking them through a process. Just having the ability that we have now as marketers to kind of peek behind the veil and see what people are talking about. No marketing profession has had this kind of access before. And if we're not taking 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there to learn what people are wanting from us, we're really doing a disservice, not just to our audiences, but to ourselves and to our companies. Delivering those messages that people want and need, that crosses over both PR and content marketing. And you're really trying to reach similar audiences on similar platforms.
And I think also having that engagement um, with the different folks can kind of cross pollinate too. Because if you end up having a positive interaction with a journalist on social, the other folks in your community are going to see that, and vice versa. So I think, we do kind of have to throw away the idea of some of these things being, a PR engagement or them being, a marketing engagement. They're just an engagement with the larger community that you have, which includes all those people and includes, it includes, the robots too. It includes the AI tools that are figuring out who you are and who cares about what you do. So, to me, that's the other really cool potential, is that the way that you engage on social is going to affect that too.
And one of my favorite ways to use LinkedIn is to celebrate our clients and the internal stakeholders on client teams. Most everybody that we work with is out on LinkedIn in some capacity, whether they're a lurker or a poster. But it's really fun to look back and say, hey, 1 year ago we launched this website. Let's give a shout out to Frank and Jackie and Naomi and whoever else on the team, along with tagging their institution. So they're not only getting that personal dopamine hit, but we're giving some brand exposure as well to the client themselves. And if it's a large institution, we've had, directors, we've had deans, we've had faculty reach out and just say, hey, great job to Frank and Naomi and the team. And so getting that, online kudos, especially in a remote world where a lot of our clients are working, not on the campuses where their institution is.
Yeah.
It really feels good to get that feedback from a higher up who maybe would never have even thought to reach out and give you a high five.
Exactly. And I love that we can use that to lift up the people that we've worked with. I think that's such a valuable use of social. And it's just like whenever I see somebody's looking for somebody who does whatever it is, I'm always like, oh, hey, do you know this person? Always trying to do that, because I do think it is really important to use your network and to use, the things that you absorb and that you kind of collect and curate,
Yeah,
use that to help the other people in your life, because it comes back around in a
yeah.
good way for everybody.
And sometimes those people get reached out to, by journalists, by other industries, hey, would you like to come speak at our conference? I know that I've had that happen to me because they saw somebody else tagged me in a post and they thought, oh, she must be worthwhile if Erika knows her, right? So getting that opportunity to boost each other helps from a PR perspective as well, both for you and for your person that you're tagging or talking to.
100%. So, all right. There's so much information that we can take in from social. And then we have so many different objectives, so many goals that we're pursuing. But I've definitely found that if you're going to have that kind of really integrated, organizationally impactful social media strategy, you need to have a solid calendar. And I know there are so many people who have so many opinions about calendars, but I wanted to hear from you, like, what to you is an ideal, calendar that can, meet the content and PR needs, which are very different, and especially when you're talking about timelines, because a PR need for social is frequently a, hey, do we have time today to do a thing? Versus the content timeline might be months long.
Yeah, yeah, I love this question. We just did a really fun project over the last week or so. We're still kind of working on for our it's a group called Be Well, who is out in New Mexico. They're the New Mexico Health Insurance Exchange. So they help connect people who don't have insurance to their jobs or maybe can't afford insurance with affordable healthcare coverage. And so they go out throughout their entire state. New Mexico is a very rural state, and so they try to cover as many platforms as they can to try to reach people. So we actually went through their calendar with them over the last week in our regular meeting and said, hey, we think it would be a great idea for you to put some of these virtual sign up in enrollment events and community education events out on Facebook. And the team thought that was a fun idea, but they also felt really spread thin. So we helped them put all of these events out through the end of the year. And the reason we suggested that is because within an event on Facebook, you can then have commentary from individuals. They can ask questions, they can tag their friends.
Yep.
We suggested making these all public so people can share them. And we're already starting to see traction. We're starting to see some good discussion, hey, or what do I need to bring with me? Are we going to cover this topic or that topic? Can I get insurance if? Those comments and those questions help inform the people at the event who will be expecting those questions, but they can also help inform future infographics, videos, audio recordings, webinars, all of these different things. And so when you have a solid calendar of these are the events we're going to be covering, these are the sponsorship activities that we're going to do. Be Well is really involved with their communities across the state. They, help with 5Ks, things like that. There's an opportunity to really organically connect all the dots. So you're no longer this, looming corporation. You're this integral part of somebody's day. You help them get their basic healthcare needs taken care of. You help them participate in this fun run or walk or this community event they can bring their kids to. And you're also there answering questions when they raise them up in real time. So it's really just a nice organic, cross-pollination of different platforms in real time, in 3D, in virtual, wherever they are in that moment. Without that calendar, you don't have those touch points. You'd never be able to collect all that information,
Yep.
and then you wouldn't be able to plan for the next thing.
Exactly. And I think people can get really caught up with the idea of the content calendar or the social calendar, being limiting, like, oh, I don't want to say that on this date we're going to share this thing. And it's like, you gotta step away from that being a problem because things do have a specific cadence. Like, open enrollment for healthcare happens at a specific time. It is not something that is whenever you feel like doing it. Back to school happens, except for if there's year-round school, at a specific time. Like, there are certain things that just they do happen when they happen. And if you want to be able to get people excited about them and let them know what you're doing, you do need to have some stakes in the ground around timing for things. And that said, it doesn't mean that you have to be saying, I'm going to be posting a LinkedIn post at 7 a.m. on November 3rd about this topic. But you do need to have that understanding of what's going on in your organization, in what time frame, and what your objectives are in that time frame. And then when you get closer to the date, then you're going to be keeping that in mind. And to me, that's what the calendar is. It's here are the things that we're trying to get people to do, or here's what we need them to know about. It's not the down in the nitty gritty, because that to me is what you're doing in your scheduling tool.
Yeah, yeah. You're putting the signposts out for yourself. And myself, I am a very type A individual. Anybody that's met me knows that. But when you work in an agency or when you work in marketing, PR, you have to have a level of flexibility as well. So I love what you said there, Erica, about putting those stakes in the ground. This quarter or this month, these are the 5 things that just will not shift, cannot shift. But then you have weeks and days and months all around that where you can be building up. You can be sharing new things. You can, insert that creativity and that flexibility as long as I need to work backwards from, November 1st when open enrollment starts. By October 1st, I have to have this done so that we can promote that by, September, August, whatever it looks like, so that you can be prepared. And sometimes with marketing, with PR, there are periods of downtime, even though sometimes it's hard to remember that when you're in the nitty gritty. Use that downtime to work towards those, boring, we've got to do it type pieces that you don't feel like you want to do. Once you get that initial barrier down of, okay, I did the thing, you can go back and look at it with fresh eyes and say, now, how do we make this more fun? How do we make this more user centric? Because the hard work is done. You got yourself over that hurdle and you did the thing. Now, how do we make the thing prettier, right?
Totally. And, that also kind of harkens back to what we're talking about earlier around some of the brands, feel like they don't have time for engagement. And it's like, well, you do if you put it on the calendar. And, sometimes when I've put together brand calendars, I've even done it down to, okay, here's what your week on social media looks like. You want to aim for having, if you publish blogs every, Tuesday, then, okay, every Tuesday, you're going to want to have a post about your new, blog content. But let's say every Thursday, you go back and you look at the engagement you got on sharing that, and you had it in the calendar that on Thursday you have half an hour of time that you're going to do that. Like literally, you can plan out things like your engagement. You can plan out, okay, every Friday afternoon, I'm going to be looking to see which of our favorite journalists are on a deadline, hair on fire, need some help, a last minute person that we can help them with. I actually really encourage people to even put stuff like that in their like weekly to do. And for me, it's like if it's in my calendar, I do it because the pop up happens. It reminds me. I feel the urge. I want to be able to check it off of my to do
Yes.
list.
Yes.
But if you don't have that kind of structure, you don't get into the habit either. And if it takes you 60 days to make that habit, a good way of getting into it is do a quarter long calendar where you actually are having it split up with your activities. And so then it becomes that habit. It becomes second nature. And then it doesn't seem like it's this daunting, you know, struggle or challenge to kind of overcome.
Yeah, yeah. It's very hard to look down the pipeline of the year and say, oh my gosh, I have to make 100 events. But if you break it up and say, I can do 5 today, I can do 5 tomorrow, and then don't even think about it any further until you get, your big chunk, like you said, get that chunk done. You've got a chunk done, take a little breather, do some refining, and then move into the next set.
Exactly. And then you have it there and it's this asset that you can count on. And so then you're not stressed about, oh gosh, what are we posting on social this week? Because you've already put all the events for the year up. So you have that. So
Mhm.
what's next? What can you share from an event that just happened? So
Yeah.
suddenly you have that flexibility because you gave yourself the breathing room by doing that foundational stuff first. So I love that. Now, I'm wondering since, especially since you are in the agency and you are um, you're working obviously with your internal teams, you're working with your clients who have all sorts of different stakeholders. I feel like you're probably very well versed in how to align people and get them on the same page because, frequently it can be really hard to get everybody to agree, okay, here's what we're going to do on social or to prioritize, especially when two people want to go out on LinkedIn on the same day and you're like, please don't, you're going to
Yeah.
cannibalize each other.
Right.
So what are some of your tips that you've learned from this kind of environment to get people on the same page?
We do a lot of outlining, a lot of vetting, a lot of data, data driven kind of research. So we do have some groups, we have some groups that want to post all at once, like all on the same day, like, whew, I got my, 20 posts out for all the groups this week. But like you said, that just kind of cannibalizes it. It piles on top and nobody gets seen. So when we have those types of situations, we'll sit down and say, okay, let's divide this into 2 camps. Which audience has the most need? Which one is the most vocal right now? Let's hold on to that and put a pin in that. And on the other side, how does that match up with your business goals and objectives right now? So if there's some noisy PR situation that's happening, of course we'll need to address that primarily because we want to work with our audiences. We want to help them get more comfortable with us. We want to cease any, negativity that's rolling around out there on social because it can just travel so quickly. But on the other hand, we want to prioritize. We don't want to say where does the money come from, but we do want to prioritize. What is the volume of people that you can serve based on this topic or umbrella? What's the return for you if we prioritize, service A over service B and kind of look at it that way? That doesn't mean the high priority gets to be the one that's out there all the time, but they should definitely get first pick while there's the high priority. And so it can be really challenging for teams to justify that internally. And that's when a lot of the time we see, well, if you won't help me, I'll start my own page. And then it pops up and up and up and further dilutes the brand. So one of the ways that we can help with that and that we have in the past is to do a social media audit. So community colleges, for example, they have, sometimes up to 100 social media channels. Every little club has a channel. So we'll go through and manually review, this channel on this platform has this many followers that are this engaged. Is this worth your time? Is this worth their time? Yes or no? And just really go through and check those boxes.
Yep.
At the end of the day, we worked with Mid-Michigan College, for example. We got them, we analyzed about over 60 of their social channels and kind of weaned that down to almost half that they'll end up keeping over time. And so just by prioritizing what's the biggest impact for us, what's the likelihood that we'll keep these conversations going is a really good starting point.
Totally agreed. I found one of the way to get some of those conversations going is by having, usually we would call it kind of like an editorial board. When I was at Schwab in particular, on the internal comms side, we had a meeting every quarter, and we would have kind of a regular monthly email check-in where everyone would share, what was going on. So that way everybody was, aligned and knew like, hey, here's what this group's working on, et cetera. So that way we wouldn't end up in that situation where on the same day, everybody, was going to be getting all hands emails from, 5 different groups and have all of these, all of these
It's
things
the first of
happen
the
at
month
once.
or whatever it is. Better get those emails out.
Right? It's always the worst. But have you found that some of that kind of stuff works? Like, do meetings usually work the best, or having that shared calendar, or what have been some of your learnings so far?
Yeah, we have a couple of hospital systems we work with that have, different scopes of work across, say, like 4 organizations within the hospital. So we found that meeting every couple of weeks or every month with leaders from each of those pods. So there'll be about 5 of us in the meeting, just so they can hear, what are you talking about? Which doctor are you working with? Oh, we have something related to that. It helps them understand that it kind of takes them out of the pressure zone of their own area and gives them ways to work together better. So if group A and group B are both working with Dr. Patel on a story, especially if they're very similar, maybe they could go to one meeting, save them all an hour, save Dr. Patel some time working,
Yep.
and really just align with, okay, here are the questions I need to ask, here are the questions you need to ask. Could you please ask these questions for me and send that recording, or
Yep.
however they're taking notes? Really optimize time that way, and then optimize the impact of the post that they put out. Link together the two separate pieces if they're both going out on the website. Include some audio bits that you can run on social. Just kind of make a loop with that content instead of individual pieces with individual effort all over the place.
I've seen so much of that, and to me, that's the real power of having those, those shared conversations on a regular basis, is that you get less of that. Because it's a bummer when you hear, when you try to get on someone's calendar because you want to do a specific piece of content and you hear, oh, well, they're already talking to so and so about that, and you're like, what? Because you're like, oh
No.
gosh,
Then
can I be on that
your
call? Can
invite
I get an
complete.
invite?
Yeah.
And it's so much more, it's, obviously so much more impactful when you're included on that invite in the first place, because you've already had those conversations and you've built that understanding.
Yeah.
And I think some of that too just comes from having that unified kind of like intake process for social. And that can be like an Asana form. Hopefully it's not a Jira ticket. Jira tickets being sent to marketing people, it gives us hives.
No,
It
thank
just really
you.
does. It makes us cry. It's not a good thing. But, I do love a good intake form because it helps people think through, why should we be talking about this? What do we want someone to do? Who are the right people? And then as social media professionals, content professionals, we can say, here's our recommendation for where we should go with this. Because otherwise, I mean, you'll get people saying, oh, I want, to do an Instagram post on this topic. And you're like, and where's your visual? And they're like, we don't have one. Or they send you something and it's terrible. And you're like, well, we could certainly post this on Instagram, but it's not going to stop the scroll. No
Yeah.
one is going to want to see what this picture is of, or can see, because it's a wide picture with, something far away. And you're just like, oh my goodness. So I'd love to hear kind of what your best practices have been for having that structure around your scheduling process.
Yeah, that is a really good question. And if somebody has the answer to solve this one, I'd love to hear it later. But one of the things that we do, even internally, we use Basecamp for a lot of our work, and we've
Mhm.
started creating really structured tasks and to-dos just for our own internal calendars. So anytime anybody wants to create a blog story, they're answering some questions, or a video or whatever. They're answering questions, what's the business goal of this? What's your personal goal of this? How do you anticipate getting a bigger audience for this story? What's the goal at the end? What do you want the audience to do? And so I don't like the word forcing, but making people walk through that that thought process helps them understand, oh, these are all the things Mariah is going to be asking me for later. So I better just spare myself the nagging and get them done now. But then, having that flexibility of a calendar built in, these are the things we have to cover. So I need these questions answered now. But if it's something that's kind of more, ephemeral that you can post anytime, you have a little bit more time to think those things through. So if you're a first timer, or maybe you're just not overly sure what all is going to be needed, approach the person and just say, what are you going to need from me if I want to share this story that's coming out? There are always emergency type things, newsworthy items that'll come up and you just kind of go on the fly. But 95% of the things that anybody's dealing with on social media is not a hair on fire situation. You can always plan, you can always come up with something. One thing that we do for a lot of our groups is just look at their editorial calendar, their event calendar, and come up with organic social media content only, the text only. We can map that out for almost an entire year and then go week by week and say, okay, does this still align with what you want to talk about this week? If not, we bump it to the next week or we save it for later. But the hard text writing part is done, and then we can focus on the stunning creative or who we're going to tag or where we're going to share. So if you can even break things up into smaller pieces, you can even assign those different little bits out and still give yourself enough time to hit those milestones.
And that reminds me of a conversation I had really recently with an internal stakeholder at one of my clients who, we would frequently get kind of last minute requests. And so we chatted with them and we found out that, they were reluctant to put in a request until they had everything. And so we let them know that we want to know as soon as if you have an inkling that there's going to be something happening, put in that request well in advance. Just say, hey, even if it's like, we know around the beginning of the month, in this month, whatever information you have, let folks know, because that way we can, have that tentatively scheduled for that week. We can, be reminded to come back to you and we can see what can we get prepared in advance. Because to your point, sometimes you can write some of the stuff in advance and you're just waiting for an image, or you're just waiting to know, okay, well, who exactly attended? Who was the actual person from the organization that we should tag? And sure, that kind of stuff, you might have to wait until the last minute, but adding something small with a day's notice is not a big deal. Doing an entire, you know, set of content across multiple channels and being strategic and thoughtful about it, that is a huge fire drill that nobody wants.
100%. We do that a lot with blog too. If we know that there's some breaking news in the healthcare world, it happens more than in higher ed, at least in our world. Something new and crazy happens, we can work back in when we talk to a subject matter expert. Say maybe they're not available till 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. We have that entire day where we can do our research, we can pull our sources together, we can look through the client's existing content to see what we can link to and really build out a nice skeleton of what that piece might look like.
Yep.
Sometimes we end up turning it on its head based on what the SME tells us, but most of the time, based on collective knowledge and what we can gather from the client, we have a good idea of where the frame of that story is going. So instead of, okay, we've got the interview, now I got to pull an all-nighter and have this ready for 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, we're really just, taking 1, 2, maybe 3 hours to work through the framework we already have. We can still make that morning deadline, but we don't have to, stress everybody out and lose sleep over it.
And that's also how you build a really positive agency culture, because nobody likes working at agencies where everything is on fire and last minute, and that there are expectations that people are working into the wee hours on things. And frankly, that's how mistakes happen, right? That's how you end up with things that you have to take down from social, with things you have to walk back. So without naming and shaming, though, I would love to hear, because I think we all learn really well from our own and from other people's mistakes.
Oh yeah.
So I'd love to hear, some of the, all too common worst practices for things that you see happen over and over to folks on social.
Yeah. Oh, good question. I can pull from personal experience, and I could pull from a few, engagements that we've had over the years. I think one of the worst things that people can do is failing to be agile. And so if you are working, say from an agency perspective, if you're working on one of those long-term organic content type projects, you've got kind of a formula, you've got things, set up. I'm just going to copy and paste, copy and paste, copy and paste. And then you fail to test some of those, you might have made, 20 iterations of the same garbage that you then have to go
Yeah.
back and adjust because the tone wasn't right, the call to action was incorrect, you don't get, there's a typo in here, there's a link that's not correct, and you have just wasted an hour instead of preserving a few hours like you thought.
Yeah.
So always doing those little, here's an iteration, tell me what you think about this, getting that instant feedback and moving it forward, I think works in just about every media that I've worked in. Others that we've seen are we've just got to get something out there kind of mindset, which anybody that's heard me talk before knows that that's the mindset I generally have about content. Being the first to talk about something is really important, but only if you can do that in a way that makes sense, that's relevant, and that's helpful. If you're just slapping up a graphic and saying it's lung cancer month, look at us, we were the first ones to talk about lung cancer, but you're not giving a next step, you're not giving anything different, that's not helpful at all. You're just making clutter, you're kind of making your brand look bad.
Yeah, there's no what's in it for me just to go first. That's something that, we used to do in the old days of the internet. You wanted to be the first comment, so people would sometimes post first and then maybe even come back later to post something for real, but no one cares.
Yep.
No
And
one
if you're
cares
going
if
to be
you're
that first
first.
poster, the beauty of digital is you can always update. So put something up there that is useful and helpful. As more information rolls in, update that timestamp, make it very authentic, like, hey, this is new information. We're freshening this up. And people will appreciate that. They'll appreciate that you were there from the get-go as a resource and that you're adding to that body of knowledge, but only if the first thing you put up wasn't silly or baloney.
Before we move on to our last question and kind of close up for the day, I will add one big pet peeve as a content person who also frequently on social. It is the worst ever when you have a piece of content that's been shared widely on social. It's gotten so much engagement. It's driven a ton of traffic back to your website. And then someone decides to just take it down off the website and they don't put in a redirect. Oh my gosh. It is absolutely maddening because then all of a sudden, everyone's seeing your 404 page. That makes people very unhappy. And
Yep.
it's like, and why were you taking it down? Frequently people say, oh, well, but it's for an event that's past, or, it's for something that's no longer available. It's like, you keep the page there and you have the note of, hey, this event has already happened. You can view the archive or whatever, or we're going to do this course again in 2 months, whatever it is. Don't send people to a 404 page. It's the worst. And you've wasted all that traffic. It makes me so sad when
Oh
I see
yeah.
that.
I've seen a lot of conferences do that. And then, as a speaker, you want to go back and say, look, I spoke at this thing, and your bio is
Yes.
down and you have no proof that you were there. Like, curses.
Right? That always makes me so sad because, I keep a list of my speaking engagements on the site because, I want people to see here's what I've talked about in case they want me to come and speak about it for them or need some help doing whatever that thing is. And it's such a bummer when, SEMrush tells me, hey, you got to go and take this link out because it's a dead link. It's such a bummer.
Yeah, use that space wisely. I mean, this is a good reason to not put dates in your URLs. Call it the event itself. Don't call it like January 2024 enrollment, whatever it is. To say enrollment, you can update that content all
Yep.
the time. You can, link down to archived pages, whatever that might be. You're getting the traction continuously from that one URL, and that's saying something for your brand credibility, for the search engines out there. Just yeah, like you said, I mean, there's once you give people a springboard, you can't take it away from them.
Exactly. And just, also then it gives them the ease of knowing over time where it is that they go to get whatever that information is that they want. So, like,
Yeah,
if they know that it's, your URL /conference is where the latest conference information always is, or /events, it's just like keep it simple, make it easy, and don't change it up all the time. we used to have that same advice around hashtags because people would change a hashtag every year to have, some acronym or, string of words plus the year. And I remember, I think CM World was one of the first conferences that I was really aware of that didn't do that. It was always just hashtag CM World, just like the
Yeah.
chat. And so it meant that you knew where to find things. You knew how to tag the conference when you're at it. And it's like just keeping things consistent and easy is so smart. And it
Oh,
just
yeah.
makes things go so much better.
Building that conversation over time. That's what PR is all about. That's what content marketing is all about.
Exactly. But of course, even though there's some of these things that to me are just like they're evergreen truths about how to do a good job in social, there are also just lots of technical things that change constantly. The algorithms change all the time, the functionality that's available changes, what your scheduling tool can and can't do can change when all of a sudden one of the platforms starts charging insane amounts of money for access to functionality that was previously free, as a good
Yeah.
example.
Yeah.
So I'd love to hear like what tools or resources you'd recommend and that you use in order to keep up to date on social and to drive these successful strategies for your clients.
A lot of off-platform tools like um, namely SEO dashboards through Looker Studio. I know it's not an exact tie to social media, but it definitely gives us a lot of insight into what people are searching and what they want to know. We also use a lot of the built-in tools like Meta Business Suite. Comment if you like or don't like them, but then typical things like Hootsuite. They give you some pretty decent analytics, even if you don't pay for the full service, and it helps you keep an eye on different streams all at once for different clients, for different threads that you have going on across your various platforms. So getting a holistic look within the platforms themselves with a tool like that, looking into the specific platform analytics, and then taking a step back outside of all of those platforms at all and kind of looking at other places where people are searching. You can put all of that together. You can run really robust reports that build out nice personas for you. Where are these people hanging out when they're not on social? Where are they hanging out when they are on social? Where do those questions and kind of user journeys overlap? And then how can we meet them where they are with good information? And I always say, like, no matter how the algorithms change, no matter what the different criteria are for whether you're going to go viral or get found, it always, always, always at the end of the day comes back to creating good content for human beings. I know we're entering into this AI kind of black hole right now where people feel really uneasy. They don't know what's going on, but we're already starting to see ripples of they're prioritizing content that matters for human beings, for people, not for algorithms and not necessarily to feed the AI machines. It's really what matters to individuals.
And what's great about that is, folks who share their opinions, who share their great ideas, and who share their experiences right there, they're already going to have more human and more authentic content. So it's going to stand out from some of the content that you've all been seeing, where it's like, yeah, you can hire an organization to churn out 100 blog posts for you that are all AI written and lightly edited by a human. I've seen some of those really frightening job descriptions. They're, for, oh, we're looking for an AI editor, and you look at them and it's like, you'll be expected to edit, a gazillion posts generated by AI and make them sound more human. And they're like, oh, yuck.
Terrible.
Nobody
Who am I,
wants
Sarah
that.
Connor? What's
No
going
one
on
has
here?
said, I want more of that. I'd like more bland, median average type content. No one wants that. Unless you're just like looking for a super basic explanation of something. And most of us are not looking for that when we are going to read something on the internet. If we are actually clicking through and reading something, it's because we're looking for that kernel of difference. We're looking for that thing that's going to give us an aha moment. We're not looking for, an encyclopedia kind of an answer, because if we are, we're going to Wikipedia. We're not searching. We're going there and we're going to find the page.
Yep,
And I think people need to
exactly.
stop trying to, you're not going to compete with Wikipedia for super basic explanation type content.
Right, right. Nuance is the new king. We used to say content is king, and now I think it's nuanced content.
I love that. Well, Mariah, it's been so much fun chatting with you today. But before we go, where can folks find more from you and more from your team?
Yeah, you can visit us anytime on staymates.com. We're on the dreaded Twitter, we're on LinkedIn, we're on Facebook and Instagram. You can look up me and myself or anybody on my team. We're always happy to chat.
I love
It's
it.
been so
And
fun. Thank you for having me, Erika.
my pleasure. And I believe I'm seeing you at Content Marketing World this year.
You are. I'm speaking with my friend Jennifer Perez from North Orange Continuing Ed in California.
Fantastic. And that is going to be fun. I'm excited to get to see a bunch of folks in San Diego, which is where I went to college.
You
So
did. That's cool.
I went to San Diego State for journalism. So I'm excited because I'm like, we are going to go to Cafe Sevilla and have tapas and sangria every single night. Maybe some rolled
Amazing.
tacos in there too, but
I love
so
it. This will be
excited.
my first time to San Diego. I'm tickled. That's
Oh,
cool.
well, I will hook you up with all the good things to see and do. So I hope you have some extra time.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us today. And if you have some questions for either of us, feel free to leave them on the event page on LinkedIn or on the recap on erikaheal.com. Thanks everybody, and we'll see you again next week. Bye, guys.